أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين خاتم النبيين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. Dear brothers, dear sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah that we are together again this week, and as we continue explaining these selected ayat pertaining to a particular history of revelation and of prophets, tracing the ups and downs, the deviations and the zigzagging of Bani Israel, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has brought our hearts and our minds together to look at the larger picture and not get lost in the secular details that will never make it clear what is really happening in today's world. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has favored us with this information so that we can see what is unfolding in the Holy Land and in the larger world beyond the Holy Land. Okay, so we bring our minds and hearts together to Ayah 116 in Surah Al-A'raf. We were, remember in the previous explanations to these ayat, we concentrated our clarifications on the encounter between Prophet Musa alayhi salam and the manipulative class of experts that were summoned by the Pharaoh to challenge Musa and to disprove his identity as a prophet from Allah and to contradict Musa's message. So here we are in a follow-up to that encounter in Ayah 116. We have Musa on one side, and we have Fir'aun and his paranormal experts who specialize in manipulating human senses on the other side. The ayah number 116 says, "Ba'da a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Qala alqu." Here they are, Musa representing truth and justice, and the sense manipulators on the other side representing falsehood and injustice. And both of them have the instruments of their profession in their hands. So it was who's going to perform first. Musa said, Alqu. Qala alqu. You present or you place down what you have. Present us with what you have. Alqu. فَلَمَّا أَلْقَوْا سَحَرُوا أَعْيُنَ النَّاسِ وَاسْتَرْهَبُوهُمْ وَجَاءُوا بِسِحْرٍ عَظِيمٍ. Here is a meticulous description of what happened. When they, meaning these employees of the Pharaoh, with all the expertise and all the science and all the professionalism that they had, now it was the time to prove to the Pharaoh that their particular type of profession is going to debunk Musa and whatever he may present. So when they did, فَلَمَّا أَلْقَوْا سَحَرُوا أَعْيُنَ النَّاسِ, when these manipulators presented themselves, they threw down their حِبَالَهُمْ وَعِصِيَّهُمْ, their ropes and their sticks. These were now the instruments and the mechanism that they were using. When they did that, the ayah, Allah Jalla wa Ala is saying, Saharu a'yuna nas. They manipulated the visual sense of people. People were watching. There was a mass presence of people there, spectators watching what is developing. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, to describe what these cutting edge professionals did, He said, Saharu a'yuna nas wastarhabuhum وَجَاءُوا بِسِحْرٍ عَظِيمٍ. It's to be noted here that when we speak about this profession and this type of, let's call it science, it was magnificent, it was spectacular, it was outstanding, it was very awesome what they did. But what they did had its effect on those who were watching. Meaning when they threw down their sticks and their ropes, the sticks and the ropes were sticks and ropes on the ground. Nothing changed there. What changed was, or what was interfered with, was the visualization of people. Saharu a'yunan nas. And when we speak about sihr, we are speaking about wizardry, we are speaking about something supernatural, a type of illusionist performance. We're not speaking about witchcraft or voodoo or hocus pocus or abracadabra. That's not what we're speaking about here. There's a type of knowledge, not a type of tricks, but a type of knowledge that went into having people see what is not reality. Because when the people were looking at ropes and sticks, they were not seeing ropes and sticks. They were seeing things that are moving as if they were snakes. Let us here pause, give ourselves a mental involvement with this ayah. And because there are other similar ayat in the Quran. And let us say here, as far as we know from the information that comes to us from on high, from Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, there are 3 dimensions or 3 spheres of life or living. One of them has to do with we, human beings, social beings, al-ins, to use the Quranic word. The other sphere or domain of life or existence has to do with al-jinn, invisible beings, ethereal beings, beings whose origins are inflammable material or inflammable ingredients, components, constituents. Those are called al-jinn. So we have the life and domain of al-ins, we have the life and domain of al-jinn, and we have the life and domain of al-malaika. Powers and beings that are involved in the physics and the metaphysics of existence and being. In some minds, they are referred to as the angels. These are the three forms of living beings that we know of. That is not to say there are not others that exist. If there is, we simply don't know about them, and we simply have not been given the information to know about them. So this is what we are dealing with. When we are speaking about human beings or social beings, we are speaking about dense beings. We have density to us. We are made up of mass. When we are speaking about jinn, we are speaking about forms of life that are in another dimension of livelihood and existence that is within the characteristics of firebrands. Those are al-jinn. When we're speaking about al-malaika, or as some would prefer to use the word angels, we are speaking about light. So we human beings are the dense material that we are. The bodies, the physical bodies by which or through which we live our lifetime. Al-jinn, their nature is it's a thermal nature, one of heat. وَخَلَقَ الْجَانَّ مِن مَارِجٍ مِّن نَارٍ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created al-jinn from the heat of the fire. And then we have al-malaika, the angels, that are nur, illuminosity, light. These are three forms of life in three dimensions of existence. And so when we إنه يراكم هو وقبيله من حيث لا ترونهم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking here about al-jinn and about satanic forces that have visual access to us at the same time that we do not have visual access to them. إِنَّهُ يَرَاكُمْ هُوَ وَقَبِيلُهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا تَرَوْنَهُمْ. There are some ayat in Surah Al-Baqarah that speak about how information can be transferred from one of these forms of existence, these dimensions of existence, to the other form or dimension of existence. Information can go from al-jinn to al-ins. Information can go from al-malaika to al-ins. Ins meaning humans. وَمَا يُعَلِّمَانِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ حَتَّى يَقُولَا إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ فِتْنَةٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is speaking in these ayat about the two angels, al-malakain, Harut and Marut. And it says, when they transfer their knowledge to humans, to anyone, they do so with the proviso that we are a fitna. The type of knowledge that we transfer to you is a form of sedition. فَلَا تَكْفُرْ. Therefore, do not fall into this sedition and become a denier and a rejecter of Allah's power and authority. وَيَتَعَلَّمُونَ مِنْهُمَا مَا يُفَرِّقُونَ بِهِ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَزَوْجِهِ. And so humans learn from this other dimension, from these other beings, a type of knowledge that makes it possible to separate husband from wife, to separate both halves of a marriage. وَمَا هُمْ بِضَارِّينَ بِهِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. And the type of acquired information from that other dimension does not become harmful to anyone except by Allah's permission and license. There's another ayah in the Quran that says, وَأَنَّهُ كَانَ رِجَالٌ مِّنَ الْإِنسِ يَعُوذُونَ بِرِجَالٍ مِّنَ الْجِنِّ فَمَا زَادُوهُمْ إِلَّا رَهَقًا. وَأَنَّهُ كَانَ رِجَالٌ مِّنَ الْإِنسِ. There were men, humans who were men, humans who were breadwinners, who would seek the protection of those who are in the other dimension, meaning from al-jinn, and that type of relationship exacerbated their burden. So it's not necessary, it's not to be understood that if a person who is a human has access to information from the dimension and the life sphere of al-jinn, that's going to be recorded as a positive. It, in all likelihood, and the resultant of that would be a heavy weight to be carried in life and in the accountable life, or the life of accountability that will follow. There are some people who take issue with the paranormal. Most of these are hardcore secular scientists who don't believe in what is called in religious literature magic. Notice that I've tried as much as possible to avoid the word magic because it is understood by many people to be a type of abracadabra and hocus pocus and witchcraft and voodoo and those types of things. This is what we are talking about when we speak about sihr. We are talking about a type of information and a type of knowledge that can play havoc with the human senses. It's not some type of fast trick or the slightness of the hand. It's not that type of thing that is taking place. It's a more serious manipulation of the human senses. So there are people, who are, let's say, 100% materialistic scientists who say, well, if this ever occurred in the history of prophethood, and you have this in Judeo-Christian Islamic religious literature, the encounter between Musa alayhi salam and Pharaoh and his experts, they would say, if that ever occurred, some of them, I mean not all of them, but some would come up with something like this. If that ever occurred, it would be placing something like mercury into hollow sticks or into ropes, and that mercury is subjected to certain climate conditions in which any human being will begin to see that there is movement in these types of hollow and almost weightless sticks, and also the types of ropes that were being used. That is in understanding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and understanding His scriptures and understanding His prophets. That is a type of cop-out and a type of explanation that refuses to believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has created these spheres of existence and life, is capable of having transmission of information go back and forth between and among al-malaika, al-jinn, and al-ins in one direction or the other. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has put into existence the laws, the physical and metaphysical laws that control these spheres of life, is also able to change these laws. إِنَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. He is most capable of doing anything He wants to do. We encounter this type of let's say, these types of achievements and these types of acts that in the physical and in the material, worldly centered person, it doesn't make much sense, because they have not opened up their heart and their mind to go beyond just the dense material world that they are in. In the narration about Prophet Solomon, قال عفريت من الجن أنا آتيك به قبل أن تقوم من مقامك. A rascal, let's call it that, from al-jinn said to Sulaiman, I can bring you the throne of Balqis from Yemen. Sulaiman is somewhere in the Holy Land, and Balqis is somewhere in Yemen. And this versatile jinn said, I can bring you her throne before you stand up. قبل أن تقوم من مقامك. And قال الذي عنده علم من الكتاب أنا آتيك به قبل أن يرتد إليك طرفك. A person who has knowledge, and al-kitab here is the ultimate knowledge, I can bring you that throne before the blink of your eye. So obviously here we have knowledge that is taking place beyond the material and the clay and the soil density that our physical bodies are limited to in this world. So remember, this information can go in different directions. And it is possible for human beings to access this type of information, but this type of information cannot be utilized in the way certain human beings may want to use it. Because let's say a certain shaykh, because some shuyukh, they say that they can do these things. Let's say they have contact with the world of jinn, and they can do some supernatural things. What they can do, they may have, the point that should not be argued is they may have contact with whoever it is in the world of jinn. That is not to be disputed. But what is to be disputed is the ability of these humans to use whatever comes to them from the world of jinn for their own purposes. Or else, if this could have been done, certain individuals or this type of knowledge could be used in militaries. And it could be used against, certain buildup of military forces. Or it could be used to find treasures in the earth. There's a lot of buried treasures. People who have this type of contact with al-jinn, if it was on their terms, they could use that contact to do these types of things. But obviously, that's not the way it works. And then we go on to ayah 117. وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَى مُوسَى أَنْ أَلْقِ عَصَاكَ. And then we inspired Musa to lay down his cane. فَإِذَا هِيَ تَلْقَفُ مَا يَأْفِكُونَ. And then what happened here is when Musa dropped his cane, it began to swallow all of the shenanigans that people were watching, but it wasn't reality. What Musa did was real. When he placed his cane on the ground, it began to gobble up these sticks and these ropes. فَوَقَعَ الْحَقِّ وَبَطَلَ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. Notice here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَوَقَعَ الْحَقِّ. The word was not used فَظَهَرَ الْحَقِّ. Truth and justice became apparent. It says, وَقَعَ الْحَقِّ. Al-Haq, truth and justice, now imposed themselves. They came down into what people can recognize now. وَبَطَلَ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. And it annulled everything that these illusionists and sense manipulators were doing. فَغُلِبُوا هُنَالِكَ وَانْقَلَبُوا صَاغِرِينَ. These illusionists and manipulators now, they were defeated. They were overwhelmed. And they were overcome. And they understood now that they were pathetically humiliated. وَأُلْقِيَ السَّحَرَةُ سَاجِدِينَ. At this point, these illusionists, they fell into prostration. قالوا آمنا برب العالمين. They said, now we commit ourselves to the sustainer of all the worlds, of all of these dimensions. Speaking about al-ins, speaking about al-jinn, speaking about al-malaika, speaking about habitats we know and we don't know, speaking about environments under our observation and not under our observation. قالوا آمنا برب العالمين. The Pharaoh is watching all of this. He's present. He's seeing what is going on. He probably said to them, but I am your Rabb. I am your Lord. Pharaoh speaking to his professionals. They said, Rabbi Musa. He said, I am also the Lord of Musa. Remember, Musa was brought up in the Pharaoh's family, in the Pharaoh's palace. They said, آمنا برب العالمين رب موسى وهارون. What is Pharaoh going to say now? He is the Rabb of Harun. Harun was not brought up in his palace. So they made themselves clear. We have nothing to do with you, Pharaoh. We know what took place. We know what is real. We know what is authentic, and we know what is factual. What we have seen in our minds leaves us no doubt that Musa is original. Musa is real. قال فرعون آمنتم به قبل أن آذن لكم. Pharaoh said, you mean to tell me you have become committed along with Musa and Harun before I give you permission? Pharaoh is still right now pretending. I think it's more than a pretension because he has power. He is trying to exercise his overlordship concerning these illusionists. إن هذا لمكر مكرتموه في المدينة لتخرجوا منها أهلها فسوف تعلمون. This is a conspiracy. Now the Pharaoh is convinced there's some type of conspiracy going on, and he said to them, okay, you watch and see what I'm going to do to you. لأقطعن أيديكم وأرجلكم من خلاف ولأصلبنكم أجمعين. Now I am going to dismember you. Your extremities, your arms, and your legs, and I'm going to crucify you all together. No exceptions here. قالوا إنا إلى ربنا لمنقلبون. This is the effect when people know the facts, the truth, and what comes from Allah. They said, anyways, we are going to return to our sustainer. The only thing you're going to do is you're going to expedite that return. And some of the Arifin, some of those who take a closer look, they say it's truly astonishing. At the beginning of the day, these Sahara were kafara. These illusionists were in denial of Allah. At the end of the day, they were committed to Allah and bearing witness to the combined divinity and authority of Allah. And then they didn't stop here. وَمَا تَنْقِمُ مِنَّا إِلَّا أَنْ آمَنَّا بِآيَاتِ رَبِّنَا. The only reason you are taking revenge against us is because we have reached a certitude of commitment concerning the demonstrations of our sustainers' power and authority. They didn't say آمنا بربنا, they said آمنا بآيات ربنا, because these ayat were demonstrated in front of them. لما جاءتنا, when it was presented and came to us. ربنا أفرغ علينا صبرا وتوفنا مسلمين. Our sustainer, pour patience upon us and have us expire unto you in a state of submission. My time is up, and inshallah we will continue our journey. May Allah bless you on this day, in this year, and in the coming times that will follow. وصلى الله على محمد وآل محمد والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.